threat to democracy.
This city is under. They are now calling it an occupation.
Alarming situation there in Ottawa.
The police chief is calling it a nationwide insurrection driven by madness.
This is kind of our insurrection by air horn moment. I think it's part of the globalization of Trumpism.
Canadians know where I stand.
There hasn't been as much violence as some had perhaps projected, but that does not necessarily mean that it has been peaceful.
Reports of severe vandalism and criminal behavior.
Streets are clogged. The honking is incessant and deafening.
This pandemic has sucked for all Canadians.
Residents that I have spoken to who say they feel terrorized, intimidated.
Residents say they feel like hostages.
Residents in that area say that they are being held hostage, that this freedom convoy, as they call it, has essentially imposed a lockdown on them.
Some protesters harassed a soup kitchen.
These anti-vaxxers actually took food from the mouths of the homeless.
Hungry, yeah.
Because they're so put upon.
There have not been any violent outbursts. However, horns have been honking for 12 to 21 hours a night.
The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing.
Many of them are holding Confederate flags.
I've heard there's QAnon supporters in the crowd.
We've seen swastikas. We've seen the Confederate flag. We've seen flags with Justin Trudeau, our prime minister, in a noose. Lots of Donald Trump flags as well. People chanting, "Let's go, Brandon."
It is actually one of the rare times in history you're going to see swastikas and yellow stars at the same protest.
A few people shouting and waving swastikas does not define who Canadians are.
Ottawa is being besieged by a group of anti-do-anything-about-COVID truckers called the Freedom Convoy.
A so-called Freedom Convoy.
So-called Freedom Convoy of truckers.
It's a cult.
Yes, it is.
We've heard it called a nationwide insurrection.
A threat to democracy, an insurrection, sedition.
This is a moment for responsible leaders to think carefully about where they stand.
Characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly.
That ain't a riot, what we're seeing right now in Minneapolis.
They are strictly principled anti-fascists, and they've taken a principled stand to stand against white supremacists and white nationalists wherever they may show up.
I argue to you tonight, all punches are not equal morally.
It says it right in the name, Antifa, anti-fascism, which is what they were there fighting. Listen, there's, no organization is perfect. There was some violence.
Any reasonable person would say we shouldn't be destroying other people's property, but these are not reasonable times.
But thank goodness for the looters, man.
And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
I don't care that much about statues.
Shouldn't that be done by a commission or the city council, not a mob in the middle of the night throwing it into the harbor?
People will do what they do.
What you're seeing behind me is one of multiple locations that have been burning in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Do not get it twisted and think that, this is something that has never happened before, and then this is so terrible, and where are we, and these savages and all of that. This is how this country was started.
People get mad, and people get sick of it. People are risking COVID to explain to this country that we're fed up.
Most of the major movements in American history have started at the grassroots level and at some point have turned into direct conflict with American government. So remember your history before you judge your present.
Thuggishness is thuggishness wherever it comes from politically, and we should be the first to call it out.
I disagree.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of News from the Pew, where we take a look at topics of the day from a Catholic perspective and try to figure out some solutions going forward. I am your host, Rick Barrett, the Armed Catholic, and I am joined by three other guys that I could find at a moment's notice. We got our man, Steve Cunningham, host of Census Fidelis. We have Ryan Grant from Mediatrix Press. We have our man Fwazi Yazi, who is from Trad Cat Skits as well. And we're hoping to be joined by Jonathan Anderson at some point as he comes on in. If he can, that's great. And if he can't, that's also great. But let's get this sucker going. And so yeah, Freedom Convoy, narrative changing, going from swastikas on every corner with Confederate flags and all of these other things, and it's the biggest threat in our time, to, all right, maybe we should change our narrative and recede mandates. Either they're in Canada, here in the US, we are seeing a wave of mandates, whether they're mask or vaccine or both, being lifted in traditionally blue states. And so what is that in response to? The easy answer is polling, and the easy answer is midterms, but I'm going to throw it out to the panel now. Is this something that should be celebrated as a win, or is it something that we should say, good, the mandates are gone, however, maybe there's another shoe to drop? So let's throw it first to Ryan. What do you think in regards to the wave of mandates, the narrative that's shifting? Lena Wen from CNN says, well, guess what? Science has changed. What do we make of that?
Right. Well, the science didn't change. The politics changed. But really and truly, it is a win when you look at the momentum that, say, the Canadian truckers are having, that protests worldwide that are still not being reported on or are having collectively, with just general, because they do the polling, they look because they know when it's their bots talking, when it's actual people talking on Twitter and Fedbook and all these other places. So they can see that people are fed up. Even the left are fed up for the most part. So except for the bots, of course, which they run. So the problem that we're going to see is that we've won the battle, but not the war. Yeah. So I think we should celebrate it as a win, but we need to keep the pressure on, and we need to start talking about things like removing emergency powers from government, removing emergency powers from health officials, so-called health officials that when you look at them, they're about the least healthy people in the world. Leading others to a treasure they can't obtain, I suppose. Remember that line in Infinity War. But so really, the Canadians are showing it can be done. Surprisingly, I mean, who would have thought that for most Americans are sitting still when the Canadians are leading the revolution? But here we are. And I think the outcome in Ottawa is going to be very important for the future of how these types of events play out, because it's more or less at the present a game of chicken. Trudeau is basically facing them down, and he's a nincompoop that just reads scripts, right? Because he's employed by banks and the powers that shouldn't be. But he's trusting that he has the cops and he has all the powers of government to dissolve the truckers into nothing. The truckers are saying, nope, these got to break. People are tired of this. And more Canadians realize that as they watch one thing unfold and watch a completely different thing happen on TV, even though they saw it's the same event, they know they can't trust the media. So I think ultimately that's where we're going to, however the Ottawa protest ends, is going to be a good indicator of where we're going to be with government. And if they do cave and Trudeau resigns like he should, he shouldn't. I mean, he needs to go to jail. But beside that, he's going to resign. That's a win that needs to be followed up on. Let's talk about basic human rights. Let's talk about the limits of emergency powers. Let's talk about all these sorts of things before we end up right back here when the next scariant comes around, or real or imagined.
All right, Fwazi, what do you think?
Thank you, guys. Once again, I have a great time with you guys. Appreciate it. I agree with Ryan with everything that he said. As far as, is this a win? Yes and no. Keep the pressure going. As far as stripping their emergency powers away, that's what happened here in Kentucky. We are a very red state. We do have a Democratic governor. The reason is because a couple of years ago when the election happened, our previous governor got in trouble with the teacher unions, and that's a big no-no. And they mobilized and got him out of office. But the good news is when the pandemic happened here in Kentucky, his emergency powers were taken away pretty quickly because the state legislatures had it to where the state Supreme Court, which is very red, stripped it from him, and we haven't had a mask mandate in over a year. So that's the good news, is that most state Supreme Courts, legislatures across the country are going to be red. Even if you have a blue governor, you got to call them up, put pressure on them. We don't want these restrictions. We have a basic human freedom, a basic human right. We can assess our own medical risk as we should. We should take care of our own children as we should, not rely anything on this in the state. As far as Canada goes, here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a whole lot of countries across the world starting to lift restrictions. When funny, because we're not seeing a decrease in deaths. We're actually seeing a little bit of a spike because Omicron is more transmissible, and when it gets to people who have comorbidities and other problems, we're seeing a little spike. But all of a sudden, we're seeing these restrictions go away. I'm wondering if Trudeau actually wanted to lift the restrictions because he's reading off the script that everyone else across the world is reading, but now he can't do it because he's stuck. Because if he does it now, it's going to mean that the truckers have won that battle. So he's a little stuck. So because I saw the primer of I think Kenny from Alberta, I forgot what it was. He started to lift some of those restrictions locally. It's really interesting what's happening right now. I wouldn't doubt they're gonna ease off for a little bit. The polling has changed. I mean, the science has changed. You can tell the interior polling within the Democratic Party are dismal, horrible. This is why they're shifting now. But let's not let these people get away with it, because you're the same people who are now saying the science have changed are the same people who were pushing for all these lockdowns, and now they want to gaslight all of us as if we weren't here the past couple of years. When there's time to fight, let's fight. When there's time to vote these people out, let's mobilize. Let's think local, and let's get back to the natural law for once.
Absolutely, we got the Justin Trudeau video ready to roll if we want to play that.
Yes, and then because he's talking about vaccinations, we all support vaccines, and 90%, as he has said, 90% of Canadians have been vaccinated. Yep. Is he suggesting that unless 100% of Canadians are vaccinated, he's not even going to consider opening up and lifting restrictions? Yeah. Is that what he's trying to tell us? 90% is good for us, and I would say other countries in the world who have less vaccine uptake. Is he saying he's not going to do anything until 100% of Canadians are vaccinated? Really?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Speaker, not only are Canadians tired of this pandemic, of the challenges we're facing, but they are also, of course, tired of the restrictions, tired of the rules, tired of the lockdowns. That is understandable. But you know what helps lift restrictions? You know what helps move beyond lockdowns? Vaccinations. When Canadians get vaccinated, including with our vaccine mandates that ensure the federal public service and anyone getting on planes or trains are vaccinated, that has helped move forward, keep Canadians safe, and most importantly, to keep our frontline health workers who've been heroes during this pandemic from being overwhelmed.
Yeah, the former substitute teacher and ski instructor Justin Trudeau inspiring so much confidence as he's getting absolutely railroaded by the opposition, and rightly so. What do you think, Steve?
I absolutely love watching Canadian and United Kingdom Parliament going at each other. It pales. The U.S. Congress pales in comparison to all that. Hey, Jonathan's back. Yes, is it a win? I'm with Ryan 100% on pretty much everything he said. Yes, it is. We should be excited about that. We should also, let me bring up the Dr. Peterson clip.
Get to terrible places one tiny step at a time. You know, if I encroach on you and I'm sophisticated about it, I'm going to encroach 2 millimeters. I'm going to encroach right to the point where you start to protest. Then I'm going to stop. Then I'm going to wait. Then you're going to calm down. Then I'm going to encroach again right to the point where you protest. Then I'm going to stop. Then I'm going to wait. And I'm just going to do that forever. And before you know it, you're going to be back 3 miles from where you started, and you'll have done it one step at a time. And then you'll go, oh, how'd I get here? And the answer was, well, I pushed you a little farther than you should have gone, and you agreed. And so then I pushed you a little farther than you should have gone again, and you agreed. And if anybody's interested in this sort of process, and this is a horrifying book, if you want to read about how this process works, you can read a book called Ordinary Men by Robert Browning.
So yeah, we got it's a W, but we're not winning the war. The battle got won. Great. Woohoo! Celebrate. Don't celebrate. Don't go to sleep. Don't, pop the champagne, the bubbly, as Boris Johnson had his photo come out with the bubbly at number 10 the other day. So they're going after him again, which, if he resigns or JT in Canada resigns, they'll have another basically puppet of the WEF come in right after him. So we're kind of hosed in that situation. But yes, it's a W, but don't go to sleep because they are not. It's a long-term plan. We're in year 2 of the 10-year plan of the reset, which, again, at the beginning of this, we both talked about how, if you look at the beginning a couple years, a year and a half ago, we talked about how mid-2022 was the end of the virus. Then it gets into the climate lockdowns, the carbon problem. You see that now. Also, DHS just on the 7th came out with a national terrorism advisory system. So basically, you, including me, everybody listening, are the new terrorists. If you misinformation, go against climate change, go against carbon, go against any of this that are going out, the jabs, you will be held accountable in the state's eyes. You're an enemy of the state. So yeah, we got to remain vigilant. Don't go to sleep. As we say in Carolina, keep pounding. Make sure that, again, this goes back to act locally, think locally. Get people in. Like, who is it? I just had it on Clown Planet. They had Canada. Yeah, there's somebody running against JT, and there's somebody against in Alberta. These guys are like-minded going against it. We have to find ourselves, people like ours, to run for these offices, to run for city, state, county, and not the feds. Forget about the feds. We got to work to get away from this, break it up, because that will come and bite us down the road. They're going to put down federal mandates. I had it on CPN last week. They already got a national digital ID de facto in. This is coming, whether we like it or not. Ain't nobody voted on it. So yeah, look over here and go, yay, but the right hand's about to come over and give us a punch against the head.
So, John, thank you. We're glad that you were able to join us today on News from the Pew. Real quick, what we're talking about right now is we're talking about the narrative changing, the science suddenly changing. We're seeing a wave of mask mandates and mandates being lifted. We're seeing the freedom convoy and the momentum that's coming from them, and the pressure that's being on Trudeau. Just some thoughts on the science changing, the masks being lifted, and the propensity for conservatives and Americans in general to be very short-minded and say, oh, well, we got our win, and then kind of just go back to the next bingeful series that they can watch. But what do you think, John?
Well, on that very subject, I was just thinking about two otherwise very, very intelligent men who, are perceptive in ways that your average folks who are on TV are not. And I'm talking about Tucker Carlson and Victor Davis Hanson. Victor Davis Hanson, he's written some books that, he's an intellectual heavyweight. He really is. He's a brilliant man. But I watched a little clip of them talking about all of this a day or two ago, and their whole focus was on the elections. They think that all this is happening simply because, or maybe even primarily because of the elections, and that's why the Democrats are scurrying. And I don't think anybody would doubt that there's certainly a tendency in the blue states to jump this way and hoping they can curry some favor and things like that. But I don't know. At a certain point, you just got to get a little bit frustrated with the right that still thinks there's really a voting system that serves us well. So I guess that's my disappointment, is that even some of the most intelligent on the right that think outside the box. Tucker Carlson and Victor Davis Hanson are not warmongers like most of the neocons were, and have not been for a good 20 plus years, and see a lot of other things more clairvoyantly than folks on the right would normally. But they're still just seeing this in terms of what's the immediate battle, kind of like what Steve was just saying as I popped in there. So I guess that's my big disappointment, is that some of the folks who could help us a lot and have the public eye and an ear, are just seeing this on the narrow plane of, current politics.
Well, the problem is that most of these your conservative pundits, all of these guys, and I like Tucker too. I think we all agree that Tucker does bring up some good points from time to time. He is part of that ecosystem. So in the end, it's all about 2022. Let's get our boys back in there, and they're just going to fix everything. And despite the fact that inflation is up 7.5%, which is really not the case, it's more than that, and that people are getting starved out, and all of these things. It's just an election. It's not a societal thing. It's not the fact that society has rapidly changed. It's just an election thing. Steve, you got something else to add?
Yeah, the former, on what you just said, the former BlackRock, was he VP or sales marketing guy? He just came out with a video just the other day saying when people start seeing what's coming down the pipe in financial ways, they're going to be literal riots in the street, which, again, we talked about that before, saying that the powers that shouldn't be are probably think that we should be revolting a little bit more than what's going on right now. They probably plan for a little bit worse blowback. But if this quote unquote science changed and literally nothing has, why are we giving these guys so much, I don't know, like a slap on the wrist? Where's you locked down last time over this. Why, tell me you were wrong. At least give me an apology, and then we should lock you up for the rest of your life. None of that's happened. It was like that with a year ago when your Texas governor, Rick, was doing that. I'm going, wait a minute. He was for this stuff. Now all of a sudden he did, and he didn't give him a reason why. He just said, well, I'm just going to, kind of like the nurses. Oh, nurses aren't allowed back in the hospital, even if you're not jabbed, because they need bodies. 2 months ago is we can't have these in there because it's the most dangerous thing in the history of mankind going. We don't want them to, kill everybody. Now we need them in for economic reasons. But it's like our mental capacity is only for like, I don't know, a week tops, maybe a day. And we forget about the abuse we had 2 months ago. We're like, oh, our guys let us out and play today. Woohoo.
It really has become something of a point where American attention, everybody's desperate to get back to whatever they feel is normal. And they just want that sense of whether it's going to football games, whether it's just being able to drop their kids off at a public school and not worry about masking, which is a totally different. Don't get me started on public schools, but the whole principle on all of this. But before we move on to the next topic, anybody else have anything to add?
I was just gonna say I'm more cynical on elections ultimately because I think, we saw what they did in 2016 or 2020, but at the same time, you look at back through history, even before computers and voting machines and things of this sort, they stole elections very efficiently whenever they needed to. So I don't believe that elections actually matter, that voting really matters, except the vote with your dollars. And so, and as they're on the rush to devalue the dollar so they can get rid of the dollar, I think it's more important than ever to use cash, to stock up on things that can be used in lieu of cash, that people will be looking for barter and trade, like ammunition. And you can reckon that by dollars or whatever down the road. But, precious metals, get a whole bunch. Don't trust in one thing only. In Bitcoin, if that will work for you, you know something about it and you want to get into that, fine, whatever. But take your dollars out of anyone that is building the lockdown grid, the climate lockdown grid, because that's exactly what they're doing. The technocratic control grid is being built, and the backing off of the government boot is to just bring it in through terms of service. And so that's where it's going to come in. So you need to take your dollars away from anybody that is helping build that infrastructure. And that can get kind of tight when you get down to it. But that's what we have to do if we want to be free. We have to stop going to Walmart. We have to, I don't care if it's convenient, stop going. You have to stop shopping at whatever stores that are bringing the latest chip. You have to stop using those apps. I'm sorry, iPhones are cool, but it's part of the slave grid. So you just decide which side of it you want to be on. And I think that's really what's going to come in. And Android obviously is the same thing. I'm not trying to say only Apple and not Android. They're both bad. But, you find that solution for that device, and so you can get rid of it. Right. And so because technology is a two-edged sword. I mean, we're here doing what we're doing because this technology is out there. But at the same time, more and newer technology is being developed in such a way where you're going to be in the pod eating the bugs and owning nothing. That's the goal of how it's being unrolled currently. So you just need to get away from that, and we need to get everyone we know to do that same thing, to stop putting money into the technocratic control grid. That's the election that matters.
Indeed, I think what people need to, conservatives especially, and I'm just giving them a shout out. I think people need to start following the Andrew Torba technique of building your own server farms, and just kind of removing yourself, if you are going to be within technology, is to kind of just go guerrilla and just kind of get off of their system in that regard. So let's move on from the first topic here on News from the Pew. Second one is going to kind of be more of a broad topic. There's a rash. We've been all aware of the, for lack of a better term, attack against the Latin Mass by the administratives in Rome. And we don't want to, what we're going to do here on this episode is we're going to talk about closings in places like Louisville and in Florida. And we kind of want to give you perspectives on, instead of despairing, what can we do to prepare ourselves for those closings if they come in your area, how to stay holy, what areas to look for, because you can't just pick up and move, because that's almost like a game of whack-a-mole. And so we're going to look at this idea of closing masses. If you're in a diocese that closes the Latin Mass to you and there's none around you, what are your options there? So let me throw it to Jonathan first on this one. Ideas. There's no exclusive list of these are the 5 things you need to do, but ideas that you could give to people. So
we can make a top 5 list and be like Ryan's top 10.
We could.
Jonathan's top 10. Dun, dun, dun.
But John, what are some ideas with you to prepare?
It's hard because I've been spoiled in my life, to be honest, and still am. I mean, I think I'm probably in one of the, I don't know if there is another place where there's a daily high mass at 6:30 a.m. at a diocesan Latin Mass parish. I mean, it's unheard of, but it's awesome. But what we've done, even though we have been spoiled in my family and even me personally, is we've just prayed as much of the divine office as we can, so kind of keeping the liturgical life of the church going. And I mean, it's been great for us personally and spiritually. But the other thing is it serves as a welcome for priests if they, God forbid it should come to this, but let's just say it does, somewhat more like the penal times in England. When your whole family knows a fair portion of the office by memory, and the priest comes in and like, well, I don't have, this version of the, whatever it may be, of the breviary. And you say, well, we've got it memorized. You could pray it with you, and help you get through your office obligation there. You'd be surprised. Priests that we've met and seminarians, they've taken quite kindly to that welcome. And so I don't know, praying some bit of the office that fits your state and life has really worked well for our family. And then just trying to, it's funny that that Steve would play that clip from Jordan Peterson, because, he's got that thing in his first book about, make your damn bed. And then in the second book that he wrote, I just kind of flipped through them. I didn't read them as well as I should have. I should have given him he's a serious writer. I should have read it more seriously, but he's got another one about clean one of your rooms, make it very nice and very presentable, things like that. And I mean, yeah, I think it's a great idea as far as just general psychology goes, but then why not take it to a Catholic level and dedicate a room in your house to sacrality? I mean, have some sort of chapel in your house as far as your means and living quarters allow. So those are just 2 things that we've tried to do in a very modest way. I mean, I make less than the average national or the average state income here in Florida, but still we've been able to do something decent with our house we own here. So, it's feasible. It can be done. And then you can pray well in a room that's dedicated to it, or something of that sort. So that's just some ideas that come to me.
Fawaz.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. That was great. when it comes to this topic, it's a little bit more difficult than politics because in some way we can make a change there, either with our money or even with our vote, whether it matters or not. But when it comes to this, it's with laity, we literally have almost no power. This is a long game. Our generation, us, we're going to suffer a long time. And the key here is just to embrace that suffering, to keep it in. And we offer up that suffering and hope that God would have pity on us and give us better leaders to restore the tradition and worship him the way that he wants to be worshiped. So my thing is, number one is, listen, we're going to suffer. Let's embrace the suffering together at least. And let's continue to pray and fast. But I'm planning to build a chapel here just in case. If any priests want to come off a Latin Mass, underground Latin Masses, that would be great. And sometimes there's a pendulum that swings completely the other direction because sometimes tribes can be reactional. And when these things happen, instead of just taking one step to the right direction, we go completely the other end. And some folks either go set of the contest or some folks even go to the SSCX. When you could just go, listen, Bishop Stowe of Lexington decided to put some further restrictions for diocesan priests for Latin masses, and even some pious devotions like traditions like receiving communion on the tongue, kneeling in front of an altar rail, or ad orientem. He stopped that from happening from his diocesan priests. But he did put in his letter that the only person who can offer, according to the 62 Missal, is the fraternity priest here in Georgetown. And we've been going there, and I'm starting to see more people head to that direction. I think that's the proper way of doing it. If this is what God wants us to have at the moment, I'm going to go there. If he takes that away, and then we're going to move on to the next step to see what it is. But as of right now, I think our job for the next 10 to 15 years or whatever it may be until divine assistance comes whenever God wants it to, is to suffer and embrace that suffering. It's going to happen. So,
Steve, you muted. You muted. Steve, you muted.
Steve, you're muted, bud.
Steve, buddy, you're muted.
My apologies. I'm the worst. I'm the worst of that idea, and they're over there sweeping the floor right now. Megan is, and they want you to hear it. So mea culpa. So I agree with Fawaz on that. The embrace the suck idea, the Marine line. I'm actually I guess I'm weird. I'm kind of jacked about the situation. God put us in this time. He meant us for be here. This is all in God's providence. God's will be done. We should look at that joyfully and in the way of, he thought of me cool enough, good enough, courageous enough to put me in this situation for some reason. Let's embrace it and not complain about it. Let's look at it as a challenge. And how do we step up and rise up to that challenge? Do you complain on Twitter? Do you reject the bishop and go whatever, independent or whatever? Or do you stay the course and work out your salvation in this way? And I look at it I don't know. I'm excited about it. It's going to get worse. As crazy as that is, like, this guy's nuts. It's going to get worse, and he's excited. What else is there to do? 3 cheers for joy, as what's his face, St. Theophanes bishop would say, because all his priests were getting slaughtered in Vietnam. What else is he going to do? When I go, woe is me, or 3 cheers for joy. So yeah, I know it sucks. Embrace it. Do penance. There's probably Father had a great sermon where I'm at. He's a fighter. He's about 130 pounds soaking wet, and this guy kicked out the liberal people in 2 parishes, I think. I mean, they're so mad they're still talking about him in Boone, North Carolina, where they had an article saying maybe we get our church back after TC came out. They hate this priest because of what he did. He learned the traditional mass on his own by the fraternity YouTube channel. He gets up in the sermon last week and says, for those emailing me thinking I'm not fighting, you should know my past. I'm a fighter. I have no problem going toe to toe with anybody. And he's very quiet. Like, you have to listen hard to hear him sometimes. He's very soft. And he goes, this time I think it's a poverty that we're going to have to look for. So let's pray for embracing the poverty that could be down the road for us. And so there's for laymen, there's not much we can do besides becoming holier and work our salvation with fear and trembling.
Ryan.
I think I don't really have too much to add to what everyone else has said. I would just say that if you have an Eastern Catholic Church in your area, check that out too. Just for trads, be mindful. The Eastern liturgy is beautiful. It's ancient. It's traditional, even though it's often done in vernacular. It's done very well in vernacular. But I would say for trads to be mindful that you're not going to find everything the way you would like it. There are very few Eastern churches insist on veils. There are people there that do. There are those that don't. It is in vernacular. There's a handful of other things. It's like, you want reverent liturgy, you can keep your own opinion on things, but just be respectful when you're in someone else's house. Because I've heard stories of people, trads that went in and said, "Oh, I didn't like this." So wait. So you told them this? Oh yeah, I let them read the riot act. It's like, yeah, what are they going to think of us now? It's because they're Catholic too, and it's just just give them the respect in their house. We can talk about what we don't like it, just like they're going to gripe if they don't like about us. Whatever, who cares? But if you want reverent liturgy, I've been going to Eastern Catholic Church for probably a decade or more. 2007 or 6. Now that I think of it, and not absolutely every Sunday, but on and off frequently. And so, and that's not it's not the new right. And so it's perfectly traditional and good. You'll be a lot happier there than dealing with interpretive dance and clowns and that sort of thing. So.
All right, before we end up on this topic, and I know John, you got to run. You will have a thought for us to lead out on, and let us know and finish up this topic.
I mean, I found something beautiful from my former parish. It was. I can read this here. It says the irony of Irenaeus on the elevation of Saint Irenaeus of Lyon to Doctor of Unity. And I just thought it was a masterful juxtaposition of the great Saint Irenaeus and the current situation, without being judgmental. It's just holding the two together. And he said, Irenaeus considered the teaching of heretics to be lethal in the soteriological sense, that is, regarding salvation. Hence, it can be suspected that a situation in which any bishop abdicates his task of defending his flock against heretical teaching would be, for Irenaeus, a completely incomprehensible, even unforgivable negligence. Many people who view the first centuries of Christianity through the prism of romantic notions of tolerant and egalitarian communities do not realize how fiercely the struggle was often waged at that time. On the liturgy, Irenaeus' position was that liturgical diversity flowing from tradition is not an obstacle to unity, and that a pope who tried to force unity by suppressing traditional customs of some part of the church in order to unify everyone into a form he recognizes as the only binding one does not actually serve unity. And in summary, the Pope, who is inclined to strive for diversity in the field of doctrine, but in the field of his own liturgical tradition, pursues a policy of establishing unity through ultimate absolute uniformity, proclaims as a doctor of the church a holy man whose views and activity in relation to both of these fundamental matters, sort of, faith and the liturgy, doctrine and the liturgy, can be treated as the antithesis of his own. Well, I mean, I hadn't heard it put any better than that, so I thought it was one of the most remarkable things of this time.
Yeah, that is absolutely. It's always funny when you find those things. When times of despair, these things kind of tend to pop up. Steve, you got a thought?
It's a very small thought. The brain doesn't work too well sometimes. But I was reading Saint Cyril yesterday, and Garanger talks about his own time, of his own people, of his own time, praying to Saint Cyril, "We are soft." Now that was, in the 1800s, and wonder what Garanger would say about us today.
Very, very soft. Charmin, soft. But I mean, folks,
are we sponsored by Charmin now?
Whatever. I'll take what I'll sell out. You have no idea. But y'all better buckle up.
I can get the Bear commercial on. Just gotta tell me which one.
That's right. Whatever it takes in that regard. but yeah, we're soft, even the hardest out here today. And there may be some that would take offense to that, and that don't really bother me. But consider, because we live in a soft time, right? Hard men, hard times. We all know that parable, that meme, hard times create good men and all this other. We're in soft times. So as a result, most of us in one way or another are softer than our ancestors. I mean, I put to you that most of us can't deal with 1/10 of what our ancestors did before lunch. And they're like, oh, I built this house before, the lunch break. I'm like, yeah, that was a week for me. I took a week for me to build the same house.
Ryan slaughters cows or goats before we get up, I think.
Well, I mean, that's Ryan. We all know that he spearfishes too, and spare time to he's the hard one, right? He's
while drinking and smoking at the same time.
That's
right.
That's right.
Usually it's the rule.
So, speaking of soft times, our final topic of the day, Sunday, February 6th in Paris, there was a Muslim prayer inside the biggest church in Paris, and it's one of these things where we continue to see the daughter of the church just once again getting body blows at the whether it's the burning of Notre Dame and all of the other things we tend to see. And it's always the European churches. We think we got it bad here, talking about soft times and things like that. The faithful in these other places, man, we got to look to them, because they're dealing with some stuff as well. And it's absolutely insane to see this kind of stuff going on. I know a couple months ago there was a viral clip where in Ireland there was a priest giving a homily, and a guy in a hijab, and Muslim guy, just started doing the Muslim prayer chant. They're like, oh, let's do them at the same time because of ecumenicalism, or whatever the words are. And so it's pretty interesting. Thoughts on this topic? Let's throw it to Steve.
I just thought it was, I didn't see it till late, till Ryan brought it up earlier today, but just significant that Saint Sulpice, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Sulpice. You notice how I didn't try to do that. We're just biggest church in Paris.
So you should have started with one of the smarter guys, right? to figure out and just roll after pronunciations. I can't put it on Wikipedia and hit the everything button.
Well, we're already at a bad spot because I have to start. So we're already stumbling off the line.
It's significant because a lot of the guys that like Garcia Moreno, Leo Dupont, the guys fighting the revolutionaries, especially in the French area, they would go there first. And just to see basically that stuff going on, I don't know. This is my personal 2 cents opinion. It just seems significant that it's at that place. I know Chartres and Notre Dame is pretty big, but it's just one of those first thought I had was, wow, those are the guys, like, you can't see him. I got Moreno up there and Dupont right over there behind the screen, and just reading the Holy Face about the war against the communists. It just seems like they're poking the bear at us at the main hub where those guys would go to.
Yeah. It's almost like they like to plant their flag there. Jonathan.
Well, yeah, I'm with Steve. I think it is noteworthy because, as you said, Rick, it's the eldest daughter of the church. It's a church. It's also a particular church in Paris that has been a hub of spiritual activity. Serious mystical saints who have gone there to kind of initiate their missions, or at least definitely one of the stops along the way. I spent several years in France, so it's near and dear to my heart. That church is near and dear to me. And the only thing I can think of is kind of like with like in sacred scripture with Daniel. There can be, and I'm thinking specifically like when the king later on, like chapters 5 and 6, when they start, the king, the then king Belshazzar starts using the golden vessels, and clearly this is just beyond the pale. This is sacrilege. At some point, God's going to step in and do something as he did in the book of Daniel. And yeah, I mean, as you've most of you've already said, I mean, God made us for these times, so here we go, and there's nothing to do but embrace it. But it seems like there's got to be some sort of great cross. I mean, our sins are crying out now for vengeance. I mean, I say ours because we're all kind of part of this Western world, and things in Europe, yeah, they have gotten a little bit worse, perhaps, than in some areas of the States, but it's so bad now that it's hard to imagine it going much longer. So I just say we need to do a lot more penance even than before because of how bad this was. I mean, this seems to be on par with kind of the Pachamama stuff back last year in Rome. So it's horrible. God help us.
Fawaz.
Thank you. Make a quick point about the last topic, if you don't mind. I thought about this. Is a lot of times bishops and anybody who's an authority will use someone's ignorance against them. And what I've seen is when there's ambiguity involved, a lot of times we saw this from Moira Letitia, they'll take it and then they'll run with the interpretation that they want to push their agenda. And when it comes to Traditionis Custodes, and even the Motu Proprio, a lot of the stuff wasn't really clear, even after the clarity came out. And a lot of times these bishops are taking these things and then running with their agenda. And some of these things I think the priest can ignore when some things that are not. But the only thing is we need somebody who knows these things to come out with a list and say these are the things that are part of the authority, and these are the things that are just extra that priests can ignore. But moving on to this, I've come from an Eastern background. I mean, I wasn't even born here. I was born in middle of Islam. I was northern Iraq. I came here when I was 7 years old, and I've seen Islam at its worst. My grandfather was the head chef from Saddam's kitchen. So we've been involved in all that. There's one thing about Catholicism that I would say. It is by far the most beautiful religion. Number two, it is the only religion that creates saints. The only one that calls man to the highest virtue, which is perfection. It is the only religion that puts up monuments and glory to God. It's a religion of truth. And when, and there's no attack on the documents of Vatican II at all, because I'm not an expert in that. But when there's ambiguity involved in this topic as well, what happens is a lot of times people will take it one with their agenda. And Brunini tried to do this with the Mass. He tried to make it a little bit more Protestant, Anglican or Lutheran, because he wanted to bring the Protestants in, and it didn't do it. What it did is the Protestants weren't interested and Catholics left. And when you take away beauty and truth, that's what happens. We're never going to elevate Islam to the bride of Christ. What we're going to do is we're going to defile the bride of Christ to the level of Islam, and this just doesn't work. It's just going to make Catholicism not sacred anymore, into the eyes of folks. So I don't understand this whole situation. I think we should just teach Catholicism, lead man to the highest holiness that he could possibly attain, and Catholicism is the only one to do that. So I just don't understand it.
That's pretty well spoken. Ryan, what do you got?
Sulpice is also one of the older. Churches, although it was rebuilt in 1646 by Jean-Jacques Ollier, who was one of the founders of French spirituality in the French mystical spiritual tradition that culminates in de Montfort, actually. And so, but that church is not the first time that church has been violated. During the French Revolution, you had, what was the guy's name? I'm going to mess it up again, probably like I did when I give a talk on this. But he was elected by the Committee of Public Safety, the Robespierre's committee, to start changing symbols around the city. So one of the things he does is he goes to Saint-Sulpice, and he goes up where you have angels holding a cross, or the chalice, right? And so he'd get sculptors to go and get rid of the cross, replace it with, a lantern, like with Freemason symbology and whatnot. And they even went to the top of the church, erasing stuff that nobody could even see at the top of the church, just to show that reason reigns here now, not your religious superstition as they held it. And then, revolutionary orators would sit from the pulpit, and they would, talk and, declare, well, if God's there, he'll strike me down. And oh, look, nothing happened. I guess there is no God. And they would do things like, blasphemous things like this in the church itself. And but what I'm going to do here, just so we get a sense of the gravity of this particular thing, I'm going to share my screen, see if I can make this work. Yes. All right. So are you seeing this?
Yep.
Okay. Let me make sure I got the volume up.
I don't like the way Twitter does, man. It always doesn't work.
I love how the muzzle's the extension of the turban.
It's part of their job, man. What do you want? It's the American job now.
Is that supposed to be a muzzle in front of the podium?
The Fatiha, it's the first chapter of the Quran, unless I'm mistaken. Fawaz, do you know more about it than I do?
No, you're correct.
Well, I'm sure he does know more about it than I do, but still, I just want to make sure that was correct.
Yes.
What is yes, Alex?
Very Ricky Bobby answer, man. I don't know what to do with my hands right now. Yes, yes. Which is awesome. I love that. That's a pretty good line right there.
All right, that's probably enough right there. But anyway, so Fawaz, real quick too, what's the significance of that particular prayer? Doing that in a church, like what's the significance of that prayer for Islam and doing it there as they're doing?
I don't know. My dad is an expert on Islam because he spends most of his time doing apologetics against Islam. So I'll have to ask him and I will get back to you on that.
Cool.
Do we need to phone a friend?
Lifeline. Bring him in.
Rick's got the phone right there.
That's right. Dropping my phone all over the place. Stupid thing. But yeah, it's crazy times in that regard. The way that Fawaz and John and Ryan and Steve, you all have those points that you make, that essentially the fact that we cede ground to those who are not worthy to share that common ground with Catholicism is the one true religion. It is the universal church, and to give anybody any kind of accommodation to share the place where our blessed Lord is on that altar in that tabernacle, and to let you come on, whether it's Islam or Buddhism or whatever it is, and say your things and shake your palm trees or whatever the case may be, it just doesn't work, and it always seeks to bring down. It never raises them up. And the Fawaz, I think that you knock it out of the park. It never raises those things up. It just makes Catholicism look weaker and not the reverence that it deserves. And with that, I'm going to toss it back to you, Fawaz, for your virtue of the week.
Thanks, bud. My virtue of the week is actually going to be under the cardinal virtue of justice, which is where the umbrella is. And under that is going to be the virtue of religion, which is rendering unto God what is his due in worship. And even further under that, I was going to do devotion. And more particularly, mental prayer, because I believe it was St. Augustine who was quoted also by St. Alphonsus, who says, he who does not conquer mental prayer cannot be saved. And it's one of those things where we satisfy justice. They say 15 minutes. That's what St. Augustine says, and some other things. 15 minutes of meditation to start off. But I would say start off with 5 minutes. But more specifically, just do nothing other than just think about God. Just whatever temptation comes along in your mental state, have control of your mental faculty by just thinking about God. Don't say anything. If you want some words to kind of help you, the Jesus prayer is great, which is the Eastern prayer. Jesus, God, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Just keep repeating that if you need to. But just sit there for 5 minutes in silence and just think about God and continue that. So it satisfies justice and also makes us holier. So religion is the virtue of the week.
Ryan, what do you have to close out the program? Your final thought here.
Let's see. Well, mine would be today's the feast of Saint Scholastica, who is the sister of Saint Benedict. And at least in the Benedictine office, which I use, and I don't know if that's the case in the Roman office. Maybe, I forget. But anyway, so Saint Scholastica was the sister of Saint. She was a twin sister of Saint Benedict. They're raised together, and a lot of people hear the particular story of how she went to see Benedict one last time before she would die, but he was looking to get back to the monastery, and so she prayed that a great storm would come so that he'd be prevented from getting back, which takes place. And then following that, they spoke the entire night about the mysteries of God and everything else. And the conclusion of this is that he makes his way back to the monastery, and then that very shortly thereafter, he looks up and he sees a dove ascending into heaven, which was his sister's soul going up into heaven. And so, the foundress of essentially Benedictine nuns, really in the monastic tradition, and usually you don't get to actually celebrate her feast because Septuagesima is already hit. So usually it's toned down quite a bit. So this year we actually get her feast because it's going to be such a late Lent. So that's principally what I got.
Great. I think, Steve, if you don't have anything, we can go straight to the cry room.
Oh, okay. Let's go. Brian, I had it written down. Brian, forgive me, the old Miami coach, Flores. Brian Flores. If no one understands who that was, it was the Miami Dolphins football coach, got fired, and he sued the NFL for being fired and sued him for being racist while being fired from the most tolerant football team organization in the NFL. It has a black GM. There's trannies on the cheerleading squad. The owner bows and change flex to the LGBTQRS, everything the woke mafia wants, and he still sued him for racism. 3 days later, Lovie Smith, the old ex-coach for the Chicago Bears, who is black, got hired. So I'm throwing him as the cry room. I'll go my saint of the week. I'll go with Dr. Sam Bailey for putting up Father Ambrose's PDF on the jab. She's not. I don't know if she's Catholic or not. Hopefully she is, but it's not a Catholic podcast that she runs, and she put it. She has about 400,000 subscribers, and she put that the Father Ambrose's, it's a pseudonym, thing on the morality of the jab up on there. So I got to give her some mad props on that.
Excellent. All right. So, Jonathan, who are you putting in the cry room?
All right. I'm going to somewhat piggyback on Steve, and I'm going to put in the cry room. Get this, Joe Rogan.
Nice.
All right? And that is because he did what you can never do. You cannot bow to the mob. You bow to the mob, you get crushed. Even Joe Rogan, even Mr. UFC, come on, he's going to get crushed. Okay. And he's getting crushed right now because he bowed. It's like, come on. Nobody that watches you cares what all the naysayers are saying. So what are you doing? And yeah, so it's embarrassing to watch because his interviews, I thought his interviews with Dr. Malone and Dr. McCullough were pretty well done, and a few of his others too that I was turned on to by seeing them. But yeah, he's his little motion to the mob is an embarrassment and worthy of the cry room, I think. So there's that. As far as saints, this kind of goes. I wanted to get just a little jab in there at the for the virtue of the week as well. So I'll put them together. My virtue would be zeal, the virtue of zeal, and I've never heard it explained better than most incredible philosopher, even according to Pope Benedict, but also I think you could ask many a trad, and they would say something similar, and that is Joseph Pieper, who was also closely connected with Pope Benedict throughout his life, but great German philosopher, and especially a philosopher of Thomism, all right, exploring the philosophical depth depth, excuse me, of Thomism. And he's got a great little bit in his on the Silence of St. Thomas about the virtue of zeal. What is zeal? People talk about zeal. He says it's a fire of love, and so you may not be able to describe it the way that it's normally characterized, but it is truly a fire of love that's lit in someone that can't be put out the normal manners. So that's why St. Thomas could have it, even though he doesn't seem quite as exuberant as St. Francis of Assisi. But it helps you understand why someone like G.K. Chesterton could write side by side these biographies of St. Francis of Assisi and St. Thomas Aquinas. They both had an incredible zeal for God, that burning love for God that just couldn't be stopped. And so, yeah, zeal is a virtue, and Joseph Pieper as a great saintly philosopher, Catholic philosopher of our day.
Awesome. Ryan, who are you putting in the cry room?
I am putting in the cry room here. I'm going to do the share screen bit again to illustrate as soon as I get the window selected. There we go. All right. Sam Roca. And this particular tweet really takes it all. I love how random people from all over the right wing are united to defend Father Schmidt and dunk on Sam Roca. Even this comms director for some congressman, you go down, and Billy Gribben, I forget which congressman he works for, just puts that out there. So Roca is known for stirring the pot in so many different ways. And this is one where he attacked a priest that has a fairly good following over something entirely trivial and pathetic and stupid. And all he can do is run out his credentials out there and say, well, you got to listen to me because I did all this and I got my PhD young and I wrote all these articles, which doesn't change the fact that he's trying to find the most pettiest things possible to accuse a priest he doesn't like of being a racist. So Roca, definitely I'm putting in the cry room.
Nice. Excellent. Fwazi, who are you putting in the cry room?
Ryan, do you have the saint of the are we doing that too?
He did talk about the saint earlier.
I already did saint too.
Sorry about that. Yeah, the cry room, I'm going to put Cardinal Marx in there with his continue pressure to change church teaching where he has no authority to do so, like women priests and all of that stuff. So I'll put him in the cry room. Cardinal Marx and Stacey Abrams too. So we'll put her in there too. My saint of the day, actually I'm going to go political here. I'm going to say DeSantis. The reason is because when Trump was president, when he did something right, I applauded him. When he did something dumb, I was like, what are you doing, dude? So I'm not a never Trumper, nor am I an always Trumper. It's like, you got to take these people at what they do. You'll know them by their fruits. And I think a few days ago, DeSantis talked about this bill that he's presenting. I don't know if it passed or not, stopping the indoctrination of sexual morality in public schools, like the LBGT plus whatever that they're talking about, and getting these things out of school and saying, listen, school is not for people's personal sexual preferences and gender ideologies. School is to learn basic things like math and history and things like that. So I applaud him there when he does something good. So let's applaud him. So
excellent. All right. Well, I guess that's everybody. My cry room candidate is The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. I'll tell you this much. Well, backstory, back in the 2000, I was a huge Rock fan because I was really into the WWE and to the point where I would wear his shirt under my football jersey. Like, dude was a prototypical masculine guy up until about 2007 after his first divorce, and then he got married, and then he took the knee to China, and just a complete and utter disgrace, whiny, nasty, very liberal type. And it continued when he came out to support Rogan, which I don't care about. But then he backtracked after the N-word controversy stuff, even though people are like, hey, is this you? When he was doing all these crazy bits in the WWE about China and all this other kind of stuff. The fact that he is just so desperate to pursue money and wealth that he will step over anybody that he considered friends and that stood up for him at any other moment in time, that he'll throw under the bus just to appease, his Chinese overlords. For me, that puts The Rock in the in the cry room for me this week. And I know we're supposed to, my Saint, I'm actually going to pick Saint Jose Luis Sanchez de Rio, because I have a special devotion to the Cristeros. A lot of love towards them in that regard. And we talk about Charmin stuff today.
Smell what the Rock is cooking. The Rock says,
y'all want to watch that right? Want to watch that right there?
He plays himself in every movie now, basically,
and he's awesome at it. Well, he was awesome at it back in the day when he was just like the big hulking.
What was that most recent one he did with Ryan Reynolds? That I gave up midway through as it was too terrible. But like Reynolds was actually somewhat interesting for a change because he plays himself too, practically. but yeah, the Rock. I don't know. Moana was the last thing I saw. He was just voice acting, but that was actually surprisingly fairly wholesome and decent as far as storytelling goes for a change. It's coming out of was that Disney or DreamWorks or DreamWorks?
That was Disney.
There was it, yeah.
I remember our dad had a sports bar that the family ran in the 90s, and one time we had the WWF championship on, or Stone Cold versus The Rock, and there were people in the back going, "Give the people's elbow."
That's right, baby. The most electrifying move in sports entertainment. Like I was down. I was all about The Rock. So just to see him capitulate and be such a beta male. I don't care if he's got muscles on top. They're all roided out anyway. But I mean, the fact he has no character, he can be as physically strong as possible, but he's just mentally weak. And that's really something that's pretty shameful. But yeah, that's our candidates for the cry room. We've talked about our Saints, and I think we're about to wrap up this episode of News from the Pew. Thank you all for hanging out with us. God bless, and we'll talk next week.